It's the end of the year, so that means it's time to distill the entire thing into a single game. The time when we throw out all the pretenders and decide on just one game to rule them all. Hopefully, I'm still John Robertson, and I'll be joined, as by usual, by Stace Harmon. I just want to take a moment to offer you a heartfelt thanks for all of your support this year. Genuinely, it means a lot to us, and it makes us really excited to be able to bring you something new in the first half of 2021 in the form of 20 Double Fine years, our book charting the history, creations, and creative approaches of every single one of Double Fine's games so far, starting way back with Psychonauts 1 and ending quite neatly with the upcoming Psychonauts 2. We hope that our choices for Game of the Year 2020 don't alienate us from you too much, so enjoy and we'll see you in 2021.
It's the end of the year, so we are talking about Game of the Year, and we've both put together a short list of games before revealing our final winner. So, John, what is your short list of games for 2020 Game of the Year?
Yeah, so when I was looking back at this, I thought that there weren't that many contenders, but actually there are. So I think a lot of them have come up like in the second half of the year as well, for me anyway, rather than the first half of the year. So the year kind of feels a bit sort of, shorter maybe when looking at these. So Hades. I
think that's probably the only way in which 2020 feels shorter for anybody is game selections.
Yeah. So Hades. So shortlist: Hades, the Demon Souls PS5 remake remaster. That's a remake, isn't it? It's not a remaster. A remake. Among Us, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Final Fantasy VII remake. And then like sort of lesser sort of honourable mentions, I suppose. Microsoft Flight Simulator, F1 2020, which like Yakuza Like a Dragon, which I liked a lot, but probably not quite Game of the Year contenders, but worth a shout out.
So you've got a shortlist there that also includes honourable mentions. So what would be because I would assume there are some of those, as you've just alluded to, that aren't actually in the running for Game of the Year. So which ones, which are the ones that caused you issues in picking the single Game of the Year? Which are the ones that it was actually like a toss-up between?
Yeah, the first five. So the first five that I mentioned, Hades, Demon Souls remake, Final Fantasy VII remake, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Among Us. Okay. And they're all very different games as well. But all very good. So it's one of those things where it's not necessarily a case of determining just which one is in absolute terms better than the other, because they're kind of difficult to directly compare, but it's I don't know, just whatever the nebulous concept of what means more to you, what impacted you more, I guess.
Yeah, well, they're not being judged by the same criteria, right? Like they mean different things at different times of the year, and that's a similar thing for me. So Hades is also on my shortlist. Last of Us Part 2 is on my shortlist. I don't think I have any of your other ones on my list. Those it's between those two for me for an actual pick. But then there is also Animal Crossing, which I played a lot of, as did I think anybody who played Animal Crossing played it, in earnest throughout the early months of lockdown. And it was that kind of. I didn't feel like that's why I was playing it. I didn't feel like I was playing it in order to escape. But there was a certain soothing element to playing that every day, because it was literally checking in every day to see what was going on and buying turnips on a Sunday and then waiting a week to try and sell them at the highest price and blah, blah, blah. Any of this will be familiar to people that have played Animal Crossing.
Well, I guess it in some small way. I mean, I haven't played it, so I don't know from inside out, but from the outside looking in, it does. Maybe you could argue that those elements like the turnips and the price changes and the market fluctuations and stuff, like it gives you some sense of like shared community, I guess, that was maybe lost from lockdown realities.
Absolutely. And we had a WhatsApp group that was ostensibly entirely for that purpose. The six of us that were playing Animal Crossing, it was like because you can go to other people's islands to sell your turnips, so it was every morning and afternoon posting what the price was for turnips on your island, just on that group. And then once it hit a certain high or a high that we were willing to to cash out at, we would then organise trips to each other's islands or that person's island to sell turnips. So there was a sense of community in that. Because in order to do that, everybody has to be online. You can't just like open the gates and let people come to your island. You have to actually be online at least, or playing the game effectively, but you have to be like in it. So yeah, there was definitely a sense of community in that. I organised a fishing tournament on my Animal Crossing island.
Lovely.
Gave out prizes, crafted gear for people to use, and gave out prizes and crafted bait and made up a handmade sign on the beach and all. Yeah, like it was a thing. It was a whole.
Sounds like game of the year to me.
Well, I fell off it not quickly, but once I fell off it completely. I haven't been back to it since. I don't know exactly when, but probably July. I played it solidly. I think my Switch stats say something like 175 hours plus, and then that was it. I haven't picked it up since. So that was a very particular experience for a particular time of this very particular year that I really got into, and but have then since left it, and I don't know if or when I will go back to it. So yeah, for me, the shortlist is The Last of Us Part 2 and Hades.
So obviously we've got Hades in common, but we've also got in common. So, I mean, some people would be like hating that I haven't picked Last of Us Part 2. I mean, I haven't even completed it. I haven't even played like a third of it. But we've also got in common, neither of us have picked Cyberpunk either. Cyberpunk the amazing. No, that's it. I've played quite a bit of Cyberpunk. I do really like it.
2021,
but I haven't finished it. Yeah. Anyway, all right then. So no Cyberpunk then. Just no Cyberpunk chat.
No Cyberpunk. No, we'll avoid that. Although we have managed to include it in the episode, so
Exactly.
SEO.
Well, we have to. Every article written about games, every podcast written has to be. Has to include Cyberpunk in some way.
Okay, so pick a game off your shortlist just to give a summation of why it's on that list. I guess why it hasn't ultimately won your game of the year. Which would you start with?
Well, I suppose Among Us is an interesting one. It's the most different from those. It's you can buy it for a few quid. It's multiplayer only. It's a tiny development team, whereas the others are all. I know Hades is not made by a super big team, but there's still Among Us is 3 people, I think. That's very kind of lo-fi, etc. The others are quite big and look amazing and are very grand and take many hours of gameplay to many hours of input to kind of see. So Among Us is on there because it's very different from probably any video game that I've played. There are some similarities to board games, but video games, certainly I think it's maybe the best interpretation of kind of video game interpretation of what are typically board game concepts, like social deduction kind of things. Again, maybe for a similar reason as the Animal Crossing thing, in that Among Us is social. So if you can play it, certainly if you can play it with other people that and you're all on the mic rather than just typing at the in-game chat system, and one of you is the imposter or 2 of you are the imposter, however you've got it set up, and everyone in there, and you're all kind of talking to each other and accusing each other and whatever, then it does bring that kind of sense of community back in the months where it was taken away. So it's uniqueness, the social functionality, the fact that it's kind of short and sweet, so that you can play it now and again easily, but it also stands up to just like playing it for just like 3 hours in a row, and you just play like loads of games consecutively. So it's got a lot going for it. I think it's not on. You're gonna say something?
Well, yeah, I was wondering at the social aspect. I'm interested. Do you think? I guess how big a deal do you think the social aspect was this year? Do you think had Among Us been had you been playing it this much last year, do you think it would have been a contender? Do you think you even would have played it as much last year when we were all free to do basically whatever we wanted to do? How big a factor was the fact that you were not able to get out and see people as much?
I think I definitely still would have played it. The game is still high quality enough that doesn't rely on the fact that we're in lockdown or whatever. It's just that lockdown made it more pertinent, I suppose, made it more important, I guess, but the quality of the game's still there, no matter what. Like it's not relying on that outside factor.
So it's not a online chess or online Words with Friends, for example, that people got into. I played a few games of chess with various people that I would not have done had this year not been what it was. So it isn't that for you. You still would have absolutely played it. It just
still definitely would have played it.
Was a bonus.
It's just heightened, I guess, or maybe it's not even heightened. Maybe it would have been exactly the same social response. It's just like looking back on it and trying to say, like, intellectualize the year. It just seems more bigger as a memory because it's been contextualized in that with that event. But I mean, the reason it's not the game of the year, I suppose, is that once I started to go off it, I just went off it very quickly. And it's like kind of never wanted to play it again, to be honest.
That's, I think, same with me and Animal Crossing. It served a very specific purpose, scratched an itch.
Yeah.
And then went away.
Yeah, and it's not that its quality diminished or whatever. Like, it's still as good as... It's just, I don't know. I guess maybe it was harmed by just overplaying it for a few weeks or whatever, and then it does get to a point where it does feel like the situations that were kind of exciting and tense and full of drama were reduced simply because of repetition. It's like, okay, I know I've been in this situation before.
Yeah. Do you start to see the matrix? Do you start to see the flow of how a particular game is going to go, or the tricks that people are up to, or if they do that, then that probably means X? Like you just start to see patterns.
And you've seen the same. You've seen the same like defenses from people, or you've seen, I didn't do that because of X, Y, and Z, or you see the same claims being made by people, you can. It just feels that bit less. I don't know. It just makes it feel smaller, I suppose. Where when you first start playing it seems really big, because even though it's a simple set of rules, I suppose it's got that thing, like sports, like football, like it's a very simple set of goals in that, right? The winner is the team that puts the ball in the back of the net the most at the end of the game. But actually within that, there's enormous complexity with how that happens, like near infinite complexity. Like from 1 second to the next, there's, when you take into account where the ball might be in all the different players, there's like a million different combinations that might happen. That kind of makes the game exciting all the time and makes every game different. And with Among Us, it did feel like that for a while. But then after a couple of months, you can see all the different links now, and each game isn't necessarily... Of course, it's a little bit unique each time. It's never identical to the next game, but the feeling or the theme or the pace of the game would start to get familiar.
Yeah, I imagine the journey element, the emotional like peaks and troughs and stuff is the same. You go through the same kind of experience, and it becomes a game by rote.
Well, yeah,
rather than by
and like winning
experience.
Yeah, winning as the imposter starts to be less exciting, and being killed by the imposter is less like kind of an injustice or whatever. Like the highs are just
blunted.
lower.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so Among Us nonetheless was clearly a very important game to you, and
and whatever those guys go on to do next, it's like, all eyes on them, because it was an amazing achievement.
Yeah. I remember when we spoke to Celador Games, Teddy Lee, I think, about Rogue Legacy.
Yeah.
And he talked about that thing of people complaining that, they'd played it for 50, 60, 70 hours and there was nothing else to do. And his response to that was that it was never meant to be a game that you were going to play that long. Like, it's amazing that you have, but it was never designed to be played that long.
Yeah.
Therefore, the fact that you're kind of bored of it after that amount of time is not a negative. It's not a...
Well, yeah, because I feel like I'm being a bit harsh on it by saying that, like, oh, you go off it quickly once you start to go off it. But, you know, I've still included it in my game of the year running. Like, I still respect everything that it's done. Like, I don't want to play it now, like, really. But that doesn't mean that I haven't, that I just forget about the goods that it gave. Like...
Yeah. All right. So Among Us, I mean, that was a contender. I think the fact that it even sits alongside some of those other games is, you know, it speaks to the breadth of platforms and experiences and touching points of the different games that you've picked.
Well, yeah, I must say with Among Us as well. I did play it on the phone a bit, on Androids for a bit, which you can play for free with ads. But the user experience compared to PC is horrible. Just paid it. Just if you haven't played it, pay the extra few pounds. Play the Steam version. It's so much better.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. That's good for anybody coming to Among Us at this stage. The PC's the way to go. Okay. So Among Us falls by the wayside. Valiantly.
Yeah, so you've only got 2 games then.
I've only got 2.
So you have to pick the game that you're not going to pick, which is going to reveal the game that is the game of the year, and say why.
Well, yeah,
why
but the
it
game.
wasn't.
I mean, you know, that's not why it's not whether the game that we reveal to be the game of the year is not really. There's not going to be any huge revelation in that, is there? There's not going to be like, oh, it's this game that nobody's ever heard of. It's like, well, it's one of these games that even a couple of weeks ago was nominated at the Game Awards for Game of the Year. Both Last of Us Part 2 and Hades won various different awards at the Game Awards. Hades won Best Action Game, and Last of Us won Best Action Adventure Game and overall Best Game. Laura Bailey won Best Performer for Abby, and yeah. So the fact that it's these 2 games that I've picked is not, you know, I'm hardly breaking any molds, but nonetheless they are both. Incredibly important to me. I have had a very emotional response to both of them. I love them both for very, very different reasons. So to talk about, and there's also a complete contradiction in my selection, because not a few weeks ago on the Game of the Generation episode that we did, in which we look back at the PS4, Xbox One generation, I picked Last of Us Part 2 as my Game of the Generation. And The Last of Us Part 2 remains my Game of the Generation, even though I haven't picked it as my Game of the Year, which I understand sounds like it makes absolutely no sense. And that in some ways it does make absolutely no sense.
Okay, so what are the ways that it does make sense?
Well, the ways that it makes sense to me, or the way that I justify or validate this, is that The Last of Us Part 2, and I think I said this a bit, I talked to this a little bit during that episode, is that I think of it as something different. And I don't mean I think of it as something more than a game. I'm not talking about elevating it to some like lofty standard, but when I think about my experience with The Last of Us as a whole, both games and the Left Behind DLC, and what they've meant to me personally, what they've meant to me professionally, what I've done because of those games, the experiences I've had because of those games that have tied in very personally or very closely to my personal life. The Last of Us Part 2 it becomes more than just it gets judged in a different way. It's like, that is my experience of the generation. That's my experience of the year, which sounds really... Well, it sounds, insert expletive here. It sounds whatever it sounds like, but that is what it is. Like, The Last of Us Part 2 is kind of a different thing for me. It sounds like
you went on a spiritual journey through the desert in Arizona or whatever, or Mexico, having taken ayahuasca or whatever. And then you're like, well, you can't treat that as a life experience because it's more than a life experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be, well, again, whatever the word is, pick whatever word you want to pick. I'm not trying to be that about it, but that is how I feel about it. So that's why I can keep Last of Us Part 2 as my...
So it's not Game of the Year because it's more than a game.
It's not... It's not game of the year. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of basic, like trying to...
Because you can't lower it to be game of the year.
Drill it down to a sentence. But it is my game of the generation, so in that sense, it is a game. So, you know, I'm very well aware of the juxtaposition of those two things and that they make no sense in many ways. But The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that I played this year and had an experience with. I've been through it twice now. And I mean, it is incredible. The experience I had with it was incredible. I understand the detractors of it. I understand the criticisms of it. Certainly on the first playthrough, I was not as on board. The first playthrough, I thought, well, actually, I prefer the first game. But then I've played the first game maybe 6 or 7 times. So on the first playthrough, I think it wasn't as well constructed for a single playthrough as it could or should have been. But then there are some of my favourite films are like that too. Like they want you to watch them again. Christopher Nolan's films in particular are very much like, well, I'm not going to lay it all out for you.
They're just confusingly made.
Well, I don't...
Tenet.
For a single playthrough.
Tenet,
for a single watch, rather, playthrough. Yeah, sure. But like that's, yeah. And that's kind of how it was for me with The Last of Us. It wasn't confusing, but it was, I didn't know where it was going. And so I got a lot more out of going back to it and understanding more about where it was going. On the first playthrough, playing as Ellie for the first 3 days in Seattle, and then you start playing as Abby, and some of this is probably going to be spoilers, but nothing major. You start playing as Abby, and I kept thinking or expecting that I was going to get back to Ellie. I kept like, well, let's do this bit and then we'll get back to playing as Ellie, because surely Ellie is the protagonist in this game and she is the one you're going to be playing the lion's share of the game with. But it doesn't work like that. It's basically 50-50. And going through that a second time and understanding that, and then being able to view it in a different way, and obviously with hindsight, made it a more complete experience for me. And I'm not suggesting that people, if you didn't really like Last of Us Part 2, you should play it twice, because that's obviously ridiculous. Like if you didn't like it, you're not gonna play it twice. You, for example, have not played it through once.
No,
and that's,
it is a game that I do want.
I respect that. I understand that. I'm not going to try and defend. I'm not going to try and like justify it and defend it. It's my experience of it was that I enjoyed it the second time through. But I'm very well aware that if you didn't enjoy it the first time, why would you play it a second time? So yeah,
I do want to go back and play it though. Like it is on my list, high on my list. But okay, no, I need to play that. And I say need as in genuinely need, not just like flippantly using need as in actually should. It's like no, I need to play it. It's just one of those, it just it deserves the respect to be played. Like, you can't just, it can't win all these awards. It can't have all of this positive reaction and then just be like, well, actually, no, like, can't be bothered. Like, just reject it out of hand. It's like, well,
yeah.
No,
But a game is harder in that way, isn't it? Like a film that wins a lot of awards that you understand to be a exemplar piece of cinematography, you can watch within 2 or 3 hours and you're done with it, and you may not like it, you may not understand it, but you have been able to form an opinion of it in that time because that is the complete experience. Last of Us is like a 30-hour game. Like that's a big thing to say, well, I'm going to experience this because I should, because nobody should be asked to do that if they don't want to. If you want to do it, that's great,
if you don't want to, of course. But I want to, but I think it's different when you either, depending on like just how much you love games, like if you love games or you want to understand games as much as possible, or you want to be like immerse in games and just like take them in and understand, then you should be making the time for that. Like if you're just like a consumer of games or just like a kind of casual fan of games, then no. But if you want to understand everything that's happening in games, why things are important, why people are reacting in certain ways, then I think you probably should make time for games like that.
I do also think that's probably quite a personal thing to you, though, because that's how you approach a lot of things.
Yeah.
You approach you.
But that's why I'm saying it, because for me, the way I approach it, like it is a game I want to play for that reason, because I feel like I need to understand it more than once. Like I need to understand it. Like I need to understand why. Like where these opinions come from? Where these reactions come from? Like I want to, where do I sit on that? Truly, where do I sit on that? Okay, my initial experience has not been great with it because I haven't finished it. Obviously, otherwise I would have finished it. But it's not fair to, you need to see the whole thing before coming to a full conclusion.
Well, and we can have, we've had conversations about games in the past, very interesting, detailed conversations about games that we've had different opinions on. Detroit, I remember being one of those. Become Human. My experience of that game was very different to yours, and we talked at length about that. And Spider-Man as well. We talked about that quite a lot, and I think it's just an interesting thing to be able to do, and you can only do that in depth if you have. Yeah,
exactly. Because otherwise, it's just reacting to. Well, you're not coming at it from your own perspective. You're only reacting to an opinion of which you have no basis but you're just not even. You're an asymmetrical level of. It's one of those things, like everyone, everyone's entitled to an opinion, yes, but the reality of it is your opinion is worth less if you haven't got experience of the thing that you're talking about. Like it just is. Like. As
a wider thing, I wonder how that works. This is kind of off topic, but I wonder how that works for you, because you do get into a lot of things very deeply. You do get invested. You invest yourself into a lot of topics very deeply, which then probably puts you in a position that a lot of the people that you talk to, like me or anybody else almost, is not going to have invested that much time into those things. So you're probably going to be more well versed than they are.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how satisfying your conversations are.
Yeah, so I should clarify by saying that it's not that people, if you're ignorant of something, like if you haven't played The Last of Us 2, it's not, and then you're talking to someone who has, and then you're trying to have an opinion, you're trying to have an interaction with them that's based around what do you think about The Last of Us 2, then there has to be an acceptance that the person who hasn't played it is, of course, allowed an opinion, and their opinion is valid, but it's valid as someone who hasn't played the game. Like it's valid as someone just looking, just reading opinion about the game or seeing marketing about the game or whatever. And that's fine. And you can have a conversation about that, but you can't have a conversation. You can't, and you can say, I don't like that. And I don't like what it's given me. But you then can't turn around and say to the person who has played it and likes it, having experience playing it, that you're wrong for liking it because of these reasons that I don't like it. Well, no, but you're coming from it from a different position. That's what I mean. Like you can't turn around.
I understand. Yeah.
So it's not that the other person's position is invalid. It's definitely not. It's wholly valid. So long as we're working within the context of that valid opinion. You can't then take that opinion outside and say, I don't like The Last of Us because of what I've seen of it, and therefore you're wrong for liking it despite playing the whole game.
Yeah, but you also can't do that even if you have played it as much as the other person. You can't say to that person, you're wrong for liking it because I don't like it for all of these very intellectual reasons.
No. Like, on that even, you're coming to it from an even experience level.
Yeah, you can compare notes far more equally, it's a far more interesting, and it's a different conversation. It's a far more interesting conversation because there's more of a, what did you think of this? And if you haven't played up to hour 20, then you haven't seen whatever X is to have an opinion on it. And I can say to you, well, this is what happens, and you can form, as an intelligent human being, you can form an opinion on that. But that's being filtered through my telling of it. You obviously have not experienced it and formed your own opinions on it. So, yeah, I mean, for the record, not that there is a record, but I would like you to play Last of Us so that we can have a conversation.
Yeah, for the record, I know that you're wrong about Last of Us and it shouldn't be in the Game of the Year contention. Anyway, it's enough about games that are not Game of the Year. What is our
Game of the Year?
Also, I've just realised, I looked it up. Among Us came out in 2018, not 2020, so it's not even in contention for this. But I think it's actually quite interesting with Among Us because the game had basically almost no 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 player base, no anything. And the developers, I believe this is right, the developers were working on Among Us 2.
They were going to make a sequel, weren't they?
To try to fix some of the stuff that they decided, okay, this hasn't worked for A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And now we will make Among Us 2 and fix those. But then the game just blew up in 2020.
Yeah.
It's absolutely blew up, many times more popular. So it's interesting, even though I still defend putting it as my 2020, because even for the not novelty, but the interesting factor of it was actually released 2 years ago, but no one played it. Well, basically no one played it until this year. So in the sort of cultural sense, it was really released this year, I guess. Now it's everywhere. It's like memes about it and people are making animations and everything. It's crazy. Anyway, so not Game of the Year Among Us, not Game of the Year Last of Us.
Yeah. So what is Game of the Year? What is your Game of the Year?
So of the others, Demon's Souls Final Fantasy Remake, Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
I can see, so just quickly as a quick interjection, I can see, I can kind of foresee, rather, your argument for, or not your argument, just your pick of one of those games for one set of reasons. And then from a kind of an intellectual standpoint, from a game design standpoint, I can also see the reasons you might pick another for a far more emotional reason, which is kind of my Last of Us thing. So I'm interested to see which it is, so if I stop interrupting, I might find out. So please tell me which of these games is. Because I'm kind of thinking it's two. I'm kind of thinking it's between two.
Well, I mean, so there are different reasons for picking all of it. So I think if it was just pure game design and pure, I don't know, just every second being like absorbed, then I suppose it would be Ori and the Will of the Wisps would be the best one, would be the Game of the Year. Mm-hmm. If it was maybe like just satisfaction and just like lasting sense of like beating something and like that kind of just like masculine like approach to game appreciation where it's like, yes, I beat that game
completely,
then also Demon's Souls would be the one. But as a total package with its baggage and with its just absolutely like nostalgia, like just ripped off the charts, like Final Fantasy VII Remake is probably, looking back on it, is my favourite game, and this might even be rose tinted glasses looking back on it as well, because it's nostalgia in that I just couldn't wait for it, and like I was really happy that it was good, and etc. So I'm really happy that it just finally arrived. But I think if you asked me at the time, like while playing, is this the Game of the Year? Then I'd say probably not. Mm-hmm. But having finished it and seen it all the way through and looking forward to part 2 and all that stuff, looking back on it again through the just like double nostalgia lens, then it's hard not to pick it. It's almost like the impact of it finally arriving and finally playing as those characters again, all of that stuff. Almost like it's almost like, I don't know, you're almost in some sort of state of shock when you're actually playing it, and you have to like wait for a little bit to actually like it's just sort of like to go over you. It's like, okay, I've been waiting for how long, like 23 years for this thing to come along, and so it's finally there. So I don't know, it almost requires you to look back in order to fully. In order to have an opinion of it, I guess, really. Like when you're in the trenches, you're just sort of overloaded with the warm sort of vibes and just like just trying to see it, rather than intellectualize it or think deeply about it.
Yeah, and that surely speaks to like just the way that we experience things as people, right? As human beings. The way that you experience something is, there is a degree of, in as much as there is anticipation for something, a good meal, that's why you salivate, or like an experience like this, you're excited about it. That gets rolled up into part of that experience, as does retrospection, as does looking back on something. Because I think that's why you can say, oh, such and such was the happiest day of my life or the happiest time of my life or whatever. You might not necessarily think that at the time because you're
no, but now I can say that Final Fantasy VII Remake is the happiest game of my life.
I believe you.
Giant sword is back. The Mako reactor's back. Cloud's hair's back. Barrett's gun is back. Everything. Like,
Tifa's back.
Fantastic.
She was always my favourite.
Yeah. I think it's got the single best moment as well. There's a... for those who have played it, they'll know immediately what I'm talking about. It's a minor spoiler if not. But there's a dance scene in it where Cloud is dancing. It's like a dance-off or a dance battle or whatever. At the Honeybee Inn, and
he's dressed up.
Oh my god,
right? They dress him up in
they dress him up. Yeah, he's in his dress and
yeah.
whatever. Yeah, don't want to spoil that bit, but
oops.
Yeah, just that scene. Like it's largely a cut scene. There are interactions as like button presses and stuff you have to do, but it's largely a cutscene really. And that scene is just oh my god, it's just so good.
Scene. It looks very. For some reason, that's all I always think of. But I think retrospectively, I thought of Baz Luhrmann.
I guess it's got like a Moulin Rouge sort of vibe to it. But yeah, that scene alone isn't what makes it the best game. But I think that is indicative of that scene. Is indicative of the game, like the silliness of the game. And I think that's one of the great things that they've retained is that while Final Fantasy does have this like lofty weight and this very grand sense of place for many people, and it was the game, the JRPG that got people into JRPGs, and it's this and that. It defined many game elements. I don't just mean mechanics. I mean like story and character and just fundamental things to any kind of piece of fiction or narrative. It was also the original was also silly. Like it was just when it was all getting a bit much and it was all getting a bit like po-faced and potentially preachy, it would just like throw in this like just crazy stuff, just like wacky, just outrageous, just stuff out of nowhere. And this one does that as well. Like so, it's got all the weight and it's got all of the depth and that impact, but it's also remembers that like okay, even though this game is thought about deadly seriously and spoken about very seriously as like one of the best games of all time, it was also silly, and this one like plays into that whilst having that stress and that demand from players to be outrageously good and very serious and really
and outrageously cool. Like it needs to be cool, right? But it also can take some time to just be. I feel like that makes it more, even though it's a game, it makes it more human. It makes it more of a human experience because there's more than just this is super cool and stylish and everybody's got spiky hair and it looks awesome. And there's also just these human moments where it's like there's something funny going on that allows you to relate to it. It allows you to engage with it on multiple levels, or at least more of the emotional spectrum. You can engage with it than just, that makes me feel like a badass, because you can't just always feel like that for the entire playtime. There needs to be some some contrast. So
and it's interestingly designed as well, because in some ways it's very conservative. Like it's quite linear. The side mission structure is very basic, very kind of like you could argue like sort of just like bolted on. Like I think that's a bit unkind, because I think it's been very seriously thought about why they've done the side missions in the way that they have, but it is very kind of old school.
Old school in the sense that I think it's like it's optional, that if you don't do it, you're not missing out on anything. I think there was like, I think that became, game developers and designers got better at doing that, integrating things into the whole. Whereas initially, I think it was like, this is the main path, here's a load of side stuff.
Yeah,
but if you don't do it, that's okay. And so when you do it, you don't get, like, it doesn't feed back into the main stuff.
No, it doesn't. Like, narratively,
you don't feel excluded either.
Yeah, narratively, they are very tacked on. It's not like The Witcher or whatever, where like a side mission can be like the thing that you remember most. Like, they are purely for just sort of buffing the bigger picture, really. Like if someone just wants to know a little bit more about the worlds and the picture of the world, and just fill in the kind of the out of focus bits on, say, a painting of a landscape, that's what the side quests are for in Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're not to really reinforce the quest or the personality or whatever of the main character or the journey of the main characters. They are very much bolted on. They are very much you know, well, you could ignore them, I say, but
that's funny that because I remember like a few weeks ago when we were talking about this, and I talked because I haven't played the remake, I've played the original and played it to completion and all the rest, and have very fond memories of it. But some of the things that I have the most or the strongest memories of, you then told me, you know, a few weeks ago that a lot of these things that I think of, like Knights of the Round as a materia or Vince as a side character, as a character of my party, were, and there was there's a mission that you do with it's like a tower defense thing. A lot of these things you told me at the time were like, well, actually, a lot of these are either secret or optional, or like these are not. And you don't just get these things as part of the story, and that's and that I didn't know that. That wasn't like that's I didn't pick those as specific examples to be like, look at me, I've played so much of Final Fantasy.
And the way that Remake goes about its mission structure and the way the environments work and stuff like that, I don't think that there will be anything like that in this game to come. I don't think Vincent or Yuffie will be characters that you can miss. I don't think that's a thing. I think the game design structure that they've set up,
design has changed.
They can't. I just don't see how they can do that. I just don't see how that's going to work unless they just completely throw away what they've done for this one and then just change it for the next one. But I can't see that happening, and I don't think it should happen. So I mean, it's very conservative in some ways, but it's very modern and brave in other ways. Like, they do change the story. I don't want to ruin it, but at the end there are some changes. The way that Sephiroth is involved is very different, immediately different. Because battle
the Final
system,
Fantasy VII Remake, just to clarify for anybody that hasn't played it, isn't the entire game.
Right? No, it's just the Midgar section. It's like the first.
So that is
8 hours of the first game of the original.
Right. Okay. And this is of a huge game. Well, I mean, I guess Critical Path it might not be.
It could take you probably anywhere from like 5 to 10 hours. I can't remember entirely in the first game to get out of Midgar.
No, I mean, but so it's that much of what I remember to be a huge game. Whether it was or not, I don't know.
Oh yeah, but I don't
think just the beginning bit.
If it's a 100-hour game, the original, I don't think there are not going to be 10 installments of this one.
Yeah.
So it ends at the end of the Midgar section.
You can jump into it now, right? You can jump into it now, and you can get you're not going to be committing dozens of hours of your life to this thing. It's like
30 hours long or something, 35.
And if you've never played Final Fantasy VII, you can play this part of the remake and see.
Because
it's not
that
much of a commitment, really.
So it's conservative and so on, but it's got these, but it's very modern in other ways. Like, they've changed the battle system, so it's much more fluid. Like, it is kind of turn-based, but there are some more kind of closer to real-time elements in it as well. But they've changed it in such a way so that it kind of still does feel like at a core, like its essence. There are some of those similar like strains and stresses and sort of sensations that you got from the original, even though it's very different at the same time. And it's just a lot of clever design has gone on in that. So I think I mean, that's a game of the year. I mean, the fact that it exists for one, the fact that it was good, the fact that they changed it was also, as the battle system kind of highlights nicely, like, they changed it but also kept the essence of the original. I think it's just very, very, they've been both kind of bold and also delicate with it at the same time. I think that's not to be underestimated, and for a series that, quite frankly, like with Final Fantasy 15 and stuff, has been a bit kind of, its reputation has been tarnished. I mean, this is like it's like nice to have it back, basically.
Okay, so Final Fantasy VII Remake, your game of the year.
Your game of the year shortlist was 2 games, and it's not The Last of Us Part 2, so...
Yeah, well, you'd be forgiven for forgetting, because this episode is now running into a whole double episode that we didn't even plan, but I guess that's what happens when you talk about game of the year, right? So it was a 2-horse race. Last of Us Part 2 is not it. My game of the year for 2020 is Hades. And it kind of has to be, because I've played 250 something hours of Hades since it came out on Switch. And now this is, you mentioned Among Us coming out in 2018. It's kind of a similar thing for Hades, because Hades 1.0, Hades came out of early access this year, only a couple of months ago. But it's been out for a while. Like, it's a game that I had wasn't on my radar, hadn't heard of it, much to my almost embarrassment, I guess. I should have known about this game.
Yeah, I would say that that's still proper release 2020, though.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the actual like retail release, if you like. I mean, it's digital, but the actual, actual release, the out of early access gold release, as it used to be, is 2020. So Hades is my game of the year 2020. I'm still playing it. It has just, as of recording today, has just had the cross save implemented, because like you, I own the Switch and the PC version. I've been playing it predominantly on Switch. All of those hours have gone into the Switch version. I bought the PC version a few weeks ago with the soundtrack, knowing that cross save was coming, and that day is now here. I've synced my save, I've played it on PC, and it feels, I mean, I don't want to go so far as to say it feels like a whole new game, but what I can see already is that it's going to give me, it's kind of refreshed my my passion for it. Like, there's a whole load of other stuff that I can get into on the PC version. Not least because the Switch didn't get any of the patches that were released on the PC version. So
how does cross save work then, if they're different?
Cross save is kind of, it's directly, it's instigated and controlled via the Switch version. So on Switch, you go into the cross save, you link your Steam or your Epic Game Store account, and then every time you save, or every time you go into the game on Switch, it will check with the cloud to see if there is a updated version of a save, and if not, if you're playing with the most current version on Switch, it will just launch that, and that's what you'll play with. And then when you save, or when you quit the game, it saves and quits, and it syncs at the same time to the cloud. So every time it's basically doing a sync on the Switch before and after, to make sure that what's in the cloud is the most current version. And if it is the most current version, obviously it won't download it because you've got it on Switch already. And if it needs to, then it will. And it's so that adds a whole load of stuff. There's a whole load of just small tweaks that, for somebody that's played it for as long as I have, are meaningful. I can see, I can go in and look at the keepsakes and the boons and different weapon interactions and understand how that's going to change things for me. And some of it is a matter of percentages, and like trying to do a no boon run. There's a particular keepsake that on Switch it gave you an 80% bonus if you didn't have any boons. On PC it was 100% bonus, and that's that obviously makes a difference.
Yeah,
but that's not why it's not my game of the year. Of course. Like,
I mean,
that's just a refresh for me of that's opens up more possibilities, streaming possibilities as well, potentially.
Yeah, because I think I mean, obviously love Hades a lot. It was on my shortlist for game of the year. I haven't played it close to as long as you have. I still played it a lot though, but I haven't played it. I mean, when I stopped playing it, I don't know, maybe it's just how I play games. When I stopped playing it for even like a few days, because I was playing it every day, and I stopped playing it for a few days, and then I stopped playing it forever after that. And it's not like I necessarily actively consciously went off of it or whatever. It's just I don't know. It
sounds a bit like you break the habit, whether purposefully or inadvertently, and then once that habit is broken, it no longer has, it's no longer a habit, quite simply.
I do
no
have,
longer has that appeal.
I do have, maybe in the way, it's not just this, it's anything. I do have like a thirst for just new things all the time as well. Like, I'm one of those people, I think, like, when I can get bored of things quite quickly, once I feel like I understand something, and it's like, okay, I get it, I know what's happening here, I know what it's going to give me, I know why I'm reacting in a certain way, then it's almost like, okay, now I need to move on to the next thing and get that same understanding from that, rather than just kind of indulge in that same thing again and again. I tend to want to move on.
You do, but I think not in the way that a lot of people would relate to, or or would understand, because that, like, you're not flaky in any way. That kind of, like, I think the stereotypical view of that, of somebody that flits from one thing to the other, is that you're flaky, but you're not. You have this voracious appetite that you get into something and you will listen to dozens of hours of podcasts, you'll read books, you'll research, you'll get into something in a very big way. And that can be anything from, ancient Egypt to coffee or whiskey. Or,
these are my private loves, not my public video game ones.
Well, it's out there now. So I did say that we should, put more of ourselves out there. So that's the thing. But that's how you do it. That's how you consume stuff, and you go through it, and then you will move on to something else. Not like having, I think not like, oh, I'm bored of it, but like having satisfied a appetite or a thirst or a whatever.
Yeah, it's just curiosity, I guess. I'm just curious about the next thing after that. But that's very charming, but we're here to be charming about Hades. So aside from cross save, what else is decent about Hades?
Genuinely just how I see it. Well, okay, so Hades, what started off, because I talked about Hades on the Game of the Generation podcast as well, as a new IP, as a new IP entry. What started off as this is really cool how you're constantly getting rewarded, and you constantly feel like you're getting better, and you're constantly growing, and there's new challenges. That I assumed that after I'd completed the game a few times would peter out. I thought, I'm going to get to a point where it's going to be like just any other roguelike. It's going to get to a point where most other roguelikes start, which is this thing of you're only really doing this, you're learning through repetition, you're learning through playing the game. And there's not perhaps much more to get out of it than that. And it just went on, and it kept giving, and it kept the challenges. It's a game that you challenge yourself. The game challenges you, but you challenge yourself just as much. And that's something that I've found interesting and also revealing about it for me, because I've never been interested in things like speedrunning or even really trying to complete a game with certain conditions, like you see Demon Souls runs with like, I'm going to do the no weapon run or the no hit run, and I'm like, I just don't like. Some of it is like, I cannot fathom how anybody can be that good at it. It's not. I wouldn't be dismissive of it as, that's a waste of time. It's like, I just cannot believe that you can be that good at it. I will never be that good at that thing. But with Hades, feels like there's this natural evolution into that state if you are into it enough. It's not going to happen for every player, of course, but it has been a constantly updated series of challenges that it was, I want to beat the first boss, and then, the second boss, and then I got stuck on the second boss, the Hydra, for ages. This bone Hydra just kept killing me. Got past that, got to the third boss in Elysium, and then there's all the while you're doing this, there's narrative being drip fed to you, there's new weapons being unlocked, there's new aspects of those weapons being unlocked, there's relationships with the gods that you're forming, there's this constant ecosystem, this holistic experience of narrative, gameplay mechanics, personal experience of getting better, leveling up as a player, that's all happening at the same time, which means you're always being rewarded. And I think rewarded is the wrong word, but I'm always finding something to be fulfilled by. And that means that I'm never, ever getting bored of it. There's always something new. And having completed the game, I checked my stats earlier. So I've done 179 runs, and I've cleared it 70 times, which I think puts me at just under 40%. And that doesn't, like, initially that becomes a thing. It becomes a thing if I want to get a streak of my runs. My total runs of 179 runs have been successful. Right. I've completed the game 70 times out of 179 times. But that becomes a thing. You think, I want to get a streak, because it gives you those stats. What's your best streak of consecutive completions? And then I've moved into this other realm of like experimental runs and thinking up builds. I've got a Google Keep note on my phone of different build ideas of, I could do this build and I could try and get these boons, and it just becomes a thing that I'm thinking about even when I'm not playing the game. So as well as being constantly challenging and constantly rewarding, there's a bigger game aspect of it. There's a bigger experiential aspect of it that I'm thinking about it when I'm not playing it. And on top of all of that, there's like the whole community side, which feeds into some of that. Like I've been watching some streamers who also, some of them are more speed running, some of them are more like, I'm going to do this run like this. We're going to do like a, like a fists, I don't know, Demeter run or something. Like there's these different ideas that get seeded. And the community is really lifted this game for me. My experience of this game has been lifted by the community, I think I should say, which is a very specific contrast to The Last of Us Part 2, where the community, of course there were people that talked a lot about the game and loved the game, but there was a lot of toxicity about the game as well. There was a lot of, and I don't just mean I don't like this game and here's all of these intellectual reasons why. I mean all of that nonsense with threats to the actors and the game directors, and it's
Hades,
like, for goodness sake,
Hades Game of the Year because no known death threats to developers.
No, and there might have been some, but yeah, no known death threats. But yes, my point is the community has lifted this game, and it's to interact with the community and to watch, even as a passive observer in terms of watching streams or YouTube videos and seeing the community interacting with the streamers and suggesting runs, it's just all been very positive and all been very, it's given it a new lease of life where it's like, well, I've come to the end of all the narrative paths. I've come to the end of all of the unlocks in terms of certainly the gameplay unlocks. There's still cosmetic unlocks I've got because they've been added. So like, am I sort of just running out of things to do? And then you just need to go online and see that people are suggesting this build or this build, and that then sets my imagination going as, oh yeah, I could do it like this or like this. And every time you start a run, there's just all of this potential that stretches out before you, and it's nice and neat. My runs now are down to kind of 22 minutes or so, 25 minutes tops. So it's become a game that used to take me an hour to complete that I can now get through in a much quicker time and try different things and experiment. So yeah, it's just an incredibly rewarding game. It looks beautiful. It sounds amazing. The soundtrack is incredible. The voice work is fantastic. The writing is brilliant. I mean, it's kind of, it's also the game that I needed this year in terms of talking about games of, not just games of the year, games of this year. It's a game that I needed without knowing it because I've got so into it, and it's really helped. It's sort of helped me, but not helped me. But I've channeled a lot into it. I've channeled, a bad day can just be, well, I'm gonna spend a couple of hours tinkering with things in Hades, and that becomes, it's pure escapism. But it's like, so what? Like sometimes that's what everybody needs.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a valid. It's a valid game of the year. Like, obviously, I put it on my shortlist as well. And I think for me, like, one of the reasons why it was on my shortlist was because I don't like roguelikes, really. Like, I kind of find them. I know that they're not, but for me, they're just not. They're just unfulfilling. They're, I don't know, shallow. I don't mean shallow because I know that they're not, but just the idea of starting over again. I was like, oh my god. It just seemed like such an uphill battle, but yeah, Hades wasn't like that. Hades was fairly quickly, not immediately, but fairly quickly addicting, I suppose. Like, it was okay, now I get this. And starting over didn't feel like much of a too much of a burden, really. I wonder if one of the reasons, just thinking about it now, I wonder if one of the reasons thinking that is that it's more structured than most roguelikes, in that you know what bosses are coming and roughly when they're coming in terms of like time or number of rooms. And I wonder if that actually gives it more structure rather than it being like, okay, there might be this random boss in this random room that you've come. Like in Hades, you do actually have like proper sets, almost like, checkpoint markers. It's like, okay, you got 4 laps of 1,600 meters, but you know exactly how far one lap is, and you know when lap 2 is about to start. I wonder if that kind of certainty actually gives it more. The structure given by that certainty offers you more. I don't know. It just feels like you're not just bashing your head randomly against a wall. It's like, okay, no, I actually know that this thing that is a genuine achievement is about to come up.
Yeah, you can prepare for it. I mean, for sure, there are specific chamber numbers where the bosses come up, and yeah, so in this, like, that feeds into the challenge thing of each little room is its own mini challenge, and you don't know specifically what each room is going to have in it, but you know, like, there's a pool of this in Asphodel or a pool of this in Elysium. You understand the kinds of enemies that are going to come up. And then every X number of rooms, and even in terms of the mini bosses, you get to choose that yourself. Sometimes there will be 2 different options to go into the next room, and one of them will have a little skull icon on it, which means there's a mini boss, and sometimes the other one won't. Sometimes they both will, so then you're screwed. But like, you get to choose how you engage. Am I going for a speed run? Do I want to just go through this thing where I don't want to fight a mini boss? I want to just get through the shortest possible number of rooms as I can, or the easiest rooms as I can. So yeah, that structure and being able to plan, how many rooms do I have left? Should I take the extra health at this stage? Should I go for another boon? Definitely, for me, plays an active part in how I play the game. That is a very, very structured thing, which you don't necessarily get in all roguelikes. I think that's an interesting point to explore. But it's one of just the many things that Hades does very well, is giving you that information. Doesn't really spring surprises on you. It's not trying to catch you out. It's like, sometimes it might be this mini boss or this mini boss, but it's, the selection that it's going to be drawn from. They're not completely random, and it all ties together very, very, very well. And it's a game now that I'll be playing over Christmas, and I'll play on PC as well now, and may well stream it. I like the idea of having played it for 250 odd hours, of doing a fresh run, going back to the beginning and maybe doing a fresh run, starting that on PC. So yeah, it's a game I'm gonna keep playing, not just my game of this year, but I'll be playing it into next year as well.
Hades and the Final Fantasy VII Remake then. Those are our games of the year for 2020. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Whatever the case, come and let us know via Twitter, Facebook and or Instagram. We are at Indie by Design on all platforms. Also, don't forget to check out our website, indiebydesign.net, where you can buy our books, including Art and Stories of Indie Game Creation, which is a dive into the creation, the approaches, and philosophies of independent game design, and Oddworld Abe's Origins, our officially licensed insight into all things Oddworld inhabitants, all the way back to Abe's Odyssey and all the way up to the upcoming Oddworld Soulstorm. On our website, you'll also find a link to pre-order 20 Double Fine Years, which is our big book of everything Double Fine Productions. That's launching in the first half of 2021, and there are some great pre-order incentives at the moment, so don't miss those. Again, the website, indiebydesign.net. So all that's left for me to do then is wish you a very, very happy 2021. We truly hope you have a fantastic and fruitful year, and we look forward to seeing you throughout it. All the best, and stay safe.